They say they want a revolution. Hundreds of protesters calling on President Trump to resign took to the streets of Manhattan on Saturday, beginning their day with a rally in Times Square and a plan to force the commander-in-chief from office. "One of the things we say is we need to make a wake-up call," said co-organizer Luis Barrios, 65. "It's possible to drive this regime out," he added. "That's what we're doing, educating people, mobilizing people and bringing hope back." The left-wing protesters kicked off as organizers handed out leaflets about the Revolutionary Communist Party, Refuse Fascism and other groups. Jefferson Siegel New York Daily News Refuse Fascism called for protests against the Trump administration across the country on Saturday, sparking fear among some conservative media outlets that the Antifa, short for anti-fascists, were planning a civil war in response to Trump's leadership. After the rally drew to a close-in square around 4 p.m., demonstrators began marching south on Broadway to a second event in Washington Square Park. The peaceful protests were planned as the one-year anniversary of Trump's election win approaches. 3 counter-protesters, decked out in T-shirts and hats that showed their support of Trump, confronted the group as they made their way south. Trump supporter Andrew Gile, 27, of Chelsea, a U.S. Army vet who served in Afghanistan, stood at a barricade on 41st Street wearing a Trump Pence 2020 shirt. Gile had a brief verbal exchange with a bandana mask-wearing demonstrator before a police officer broke it up. "We're just representing the other side," Gile said. "Our premise is the anti-fascist movement is actually the most fascist movement in the United States right now. They like to oppress opposition. A lot of them believe the state should run their life." Once in Washington Square Park, tempers briefly flared when a woman tossed a drink on one of the counter-protesters. Jefferson Siegel New York Daily News "She said a hole or something like that," said Jovi Val, a Trump-loving political activist who often shows up at rallies for both left and right-leaning causes. "I was just shocked." The young woman was seen being detained by police. Refuse Fascism co-organizer Linda Solitaire, 54, of Brooklyn, said her group has been emphatic in the messaging that the protests must be non-violent. "We don't have any control over what other people do," she said. "We talk with these other groups and encourage them to act according to the principles we publish." Jefferson Siegel New York Daily News organizers also said the effort is meant to mimic the 2011 Arab Spring uprising. "That's the model for what we're doing," said Carl Dix said. "What we're trying to accomplish is to initiate a movement that can grow over the coming days and weeks." Dix called Saturday's gathering the beginning of an indefinite movement meant to boot Trump from the White House.